Hey, what's up you guys? My name is Amber, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to be discussing Intuitive Eating, a revolutionary anti-diet approach by Evelyn Tribole and Elyse Resch. An important thing that I do want to note is that today I'm going to be reviewing the 4th edition. It was very recently completely revised, updated, and edited so that it was the most relevant to the current day and age that we are in. The authors themselves are actual nutritionists and dietitians that are certified. This book was actually very specifically recommended to me by my own dietitian as part of my atypical anorexia treatment. So I am going to go section by section and give a little bit of information about the book itself. For chapter 1, we have the science behind intuitive eating. When we cultivated the premise of intuitive eating, we reviewed evidence from hundreds of studies, which in addition to our clinical experience, ultimately formed the basis for the 10 intuitive eating principles. Today, the research on intuitive eating itself is robust, with more than 125 published studies showing benefits, with the growing recognition that IE is an adaptive eating style, which influences positive psychological and physical well-being. We've decided to begin by highlighting some of the studies validating the process, benefits, and characteristics of intuitive eating in order to give you a glimpse of the changes that may occur in your life when you rediscover your inner intuitive eater. The science behind it, I think, is very important and necessary for a lot of the people going into it who may have a lot of reservations and hesitations and criticisms. However, I do think that it is the hardest chapter to get through simply because it is a lot of technical discussions of things and of course scientific evidence. And then we have chapter 2, Hitting Diet Bottom, which goes into discussions of the different issues that everybody faces when trying to go on different diets, the diet culture that we currently live in, especially in the United States, and the damages that that culture imparts on people and their eating habits and relationship with food. And it's kind of just that concept of like finally hitting that bottom point and knowing that you need something more healthy and sustainable than what diet culture has to offer you. Then we have chapter 3, What Kind of Eater Are You?, which goes into different categorizations of your relationship with food and what they call like eating personalities. And it just gives you a little bit of a labeling for people who are into that kind of thing or comforted by it, to give them a little bit more of a jumping off point for where to go from there. Then we have the principles of intuitive eating, an overview where it gives you a very base level explanation of what the 10 different principles of becoming an intuitive eater are. Then we have chapter 5, Awakening the Intuitive Eater Stages, explains the different kind of stages that most people go through getting to the point of being prepared and wanting to become an intuitive eater. And then finally, with chapter 6, we do have principle 1, Reject the Diet Mentality. Throughout the diet books and magazine articles that offer you false hope of losing weight quickly, easily, and permanently, get angry at diet culture that promotes weight loss and the lies that have led you to feel as if you are a failure every time a new diet stopped working and you gained back all the weight. If you allow even one small hope to linger that a new and better diet or food plan might be lurking around the corner, it will prevent you being free to rediscover intuitive eating. The whole concept of intuitive eating itself is the idea that when you are born and when you exist as a human, like, your eating habits and hunger signals are very intuitive, and it is something that your body is naturally accustomed to and like comes with, but you can lose those intuitions based on how you're raised, how you're conditioned, how different cultures affect you, especially diet culture. And so intuitive eating is the idea of getting back to your body's biological intuition of knowing when to eat and how much to eat and what different foods like make you happy and satisfied. Then we have principle 2, Honor Your Hunger. Keep your body biologically fed with adequate energy and carbohydrates. Otherwise, you can trigger a primal drive to overeat. Once you reach the moment of excessive hunger, all intentions of moderate conscious eating are fleeting and irrelevant. Learning to honor this first biological signal helps set the stage for rebuilding trust with yourself and food. This chapter goes into the biological need of adequately equipping your body with food as literally energy to survive, and how depriving yourself of that will cause different effects later in the forms of binging and disordered eating, or just your body itself rebelling. Then we have principle 3, make peace with food. Call a truce, stop the food fight. Give yourself unconditional permission to eat. If you tell yourself that you can't or shouldn't have a particular food, it can lead to intense feelings of deprivation that build into uncontrollable cravings and often binging. When you finally give in to your forbidden foods, eating will be experienced with such intensity it will usually result in Last Supper, overeating, and overwhelming guilt. So this chapter is about the concept of making peace with food and allowing yourself the kindness and right to eat what you want when you want, instead of trying to deprive yourself of certain things, which will then cause you to have intense cravings and unsatiable feelings about them. And you know, a lot of the time when people like go on diets and things like that, they will often involve themselves in what they refer to as Last Supper eating, which is the concept of like, oh, you're like, oh, well, if I'm going to start a diet tomorrow, like I'm going to binge today and eat whatever I want, as much as I want, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, just getting in that cycle that is very, very hard to break. And we have principle 4, challenge the food police. Scream a loud no to thoughts in your head that declare you're good for eating minimal calories or bad because you ate a piece of chocolate cake. The food police monitor the unreasonable rules that diet culture has created. The police station is housed deep in your psyche, and a loudspeaker shouts negative barbs, hopeless phrases, and guilt-provoking indictments. Chasing the food police away is a critical step in returning to intuitive eating. Societally, we have been very, very ingrained to have a lot of different feelings about food and a lot of different negative connotations to a lot of different things. And how sometimes, you know, even the food police can manifest in other people, you know, other people projecting their own issues or things that they genuinely believe to be true onto other people, which is just very, very damaging and something that you need to actively be able to challenge in order to change. We have principle 5, discover the satisfaction factor. The Japanese have the wisdom to promote pleasure as one of their goals of healthy living. In our fury to complete with diet culture, we often overlook one of the most basic gifts of existence, the pleasure and satisfaction that can be found in the eating experience. When you eat what you really want in an environment that is inviting, the pleasure you derive will be a powerful force in helping you feel satisfied and content. So this is very much exactly what it says. It helps you find a way to find satisfaction and enjoyment in what you're eating, and, you know, lets you see that you have the right to enjoy your food and eating experience. And we have principle 6, feel your fullness. In order to honor your fullness, you need to trust that you will give yourself the foods that you desire. Listen for the body signals that tell you that you are no longer hungry, and observe the signs that show that you're comfortably full. Pause in the middle of eating and ask yourself how the food tastes and what your current hunger level is. This chapter goes into showing you how to kind of acknowledge your fullness sensations, and helps you acknowledge that like you're allowed to eat only as much as you want, that you can eat as much as you want and allow yourself to feel full, but you don't want to overstuff yourself to the point of discomfort and issues later, and you don't want to underfeed yourself so that way you're feeling unsatisfied that also leads to issues later, that you want to just be contentedly full when you need to be eating, but also knowing that like there are going to be some points where you're going to have to go longer without food than you want. So maybe you eat a little bit when you're not necessarily super hungry, because that way it'll leave you from being like unsatiably hungry later. Principle 7, cope with your emotions with kindness. First, recognize that food restriction, both physically and mentally, can in and of itself trigger loss of control, which can feel like emotional eating. Find kind ways to comfort, nurture, distract, and resolve your issues. Anxiety, loneliness, boredom, and anger are emotions we all experience throughout life. Each has its own trigger and each has its own appeasement. Food won't fix any of these feelings. It may comfort for the short term, distract from the pain, or even numb you, but food won't solve the problem. You'll ultimately have to deal with the source of the emotion. So again, this one is very much exactly what it says. It's the concept of dealing with different emotional triggers that could potentially cause disordered eating habits, and that you need to be able to deal with your emotions as emotions themselves and tackle them in ways other than comforting yourself with food, whether it be in the form of, rewarding yourself with food for different things or punishing yourself by depriving food. Then we have Principle 8, respect your body. Accept your genetic blueprint. Just as a person with a shoe size of 8 would not expect to realistically squeeze into a size 6, it is equally futile and uncomfortable to have the same expectation about body size. But mostly respect your body so you can feel better about who you are. It's hard to reject the diet mentality if you're unrealistic and critical about your body size or shape. All bodies deserve dignity. So this is a very, very important chapter that I feel like is very, very beneficial to a lot of people. And it's the concept that no matter how you feel about your physical appearance, that your body deserves respect and to be healthy and satisfied, and that you shouldn't be putting your body through hell just because of how you feel about your physical appearance, which is mostly societally based and projected anyways. We have Principle 9, movement. Feel the difference. Forget militant exercise. Just get active and feel the difference. Shift your focus to how it feels to move your body rather than the calorie burning effect of exercise. If you focus on how you feel from working out, such as energized, it can make the difference between rolling out of bed for a brisk morning walk or hitting the snooze alarm. This principle goes into the importance of exercise and how if you are just obsessively exercising to try and change your physical appearance, that it's going to end up being damaging in the long run because you're going to have a lot of thoughts and feelings about it. Whereas if you're exercising and moving and doing physical activity simply because it's something you enjoy and it's something that you feel good doing and things like that, you'll end up having much more sustainable and healthy results. Principle 10, honor your health with gentle nutrition. Make food choices that honor your health and taste buds while making you feel good. Remember that you don't have to eat perfectly to be healthy. You will not suddenly get a nutrient deficiency or become unhealthy from one snack, one meal, or one day of eating. It's what you eat consistently over time that matters. Progress, not perfection, is what counts. Now, obviously, because the book is written by actual dietitians and nutritionists, they definitely wanted to make a point to include nutrition within the intuitive eating process, but it is definitely like low tier on the list. That primarily you have to fix your relationship with diet culture and your physical appearance and yourself and your self-respect and how you feel about your own personality and your body and things like that before nutrition even comes into play, because if your primary focus is nutrition, it can definitely get obsessive and unhealthy in different ways as well. But you also want to keep in mind that, like, obviously at the very end of the day, nutrition is actually about making sure your body has the nutrients that it needs in order to be healthy. The primary focus and the main element to your health is having a healthy relationship with food, and then once you're able to develop a healthier relationship with food, then you can focus about the exact types of foods that you are putting in your body to make it an even healthier experience. So now that we have all of the specific and exact steps and principles of intuitive eating out of the way, we also have a little bit more information and references, including chapter 16, Raising an Intuitive Eater, What Works with Kids and Teens. So this is an entire chapter that is more focused at parents who are concerned about wanting to raise their children to have healthy relationships with food, which is definitely very, very important. And I think it's fantastic that the book does include that, because that's something that a lot of parents are not focused on, or they think that they're focused on, but the actual decisions and rules and implementations that they put on their children are more damaging than helpful. And then we also have chapter 17, The Ultimate Path Towards Healing from Eating Disorders. This actually, has a lot of information about a lot of different eating disorders and how you can incorporate the concepts of intuitive eating into eating disorder treatment, and how different steps and practices and principles can apply to different eating disorders, because not all eating disorders manifest the same way. There are many different kinds, and even within the same kinds, pretty much everybody has a different experience. So it gives a little bit of information on how to apply the principles of the book to your own personal experience. And then the rest of the book features, there's an epilogue, there's like a frequently asked questions, Q&A type thing, more condensed summary with all of the principles. So like that way, if you read the book but later want to revisit it without rereading the entire book, you can just read this step-by-step guidelines, while a lot of the principles and especially like the kind of introduction summaries that I do give, I've recognized that it does sound a little bit cheesy and campy, and it still does sound a little bit like self-help booky, but with the overall composition of the book, it involves not only actual studies and medical evidence and science, but personal anecdotes from the two authors, as well as countless numbers of their own patients and clients as dietitians. So we really get to see examples of every principle implemented and put into place, and how it was able to apply into different people's lives and situations, especially with the inclusion of all of the personal anecdotes and client experiences. It definitely gives the book a great sense of relatability that makes it feel less judgmental and not like you're just being talked at like, oh, here's all the things you need to do, blah, blah, blah. It's like, we genuinely want to help you. Here are things you can do, and here's how they've helped other people, which I think is a really, really good approach to the topic. You know, it definitely provides a voice of compassion and acknowledgement of all different kinds of experiences. And the book does also have a lot of notes of acknowledging people with eating disorders, of diet culture, of, you know, influences from other people in your life, and food insecurity and things like that that are really, really important. And it acknowledges that how those different experiences can affect your potential of implementing the different elements. Like, especially because some of the principles revolve around the idea that like you're going to be able to feed yourself like whatever you want whenever you need to, and you need to allow your body to like know that it's going to be fed when it needs to be. But it also acknowledges that there are a lot of people with food insecurity and who, you know, don't have the money for that to be entirely realistic. And there are different elements that they acknowledge that are going to be much harder for people who have disordered eating and eating disorders to be able to implement in a long-term beneficial lifestyle. And they also very frequently acknowledge the fact that diet culture, especially within the US, has implemented a lot of thoughts and feelings into pretty much everyone, and how it is very much a daily part of people's lives, and that it does take a lot of active education and change and wanting different for yourself to be able to fight a lot of those diet culture mentalities. And I think that that is a lot more than a lot of different books will give you. You know, I feel like just in general, a lot of different self-help things and a lot of different recommendations to have different relationships with food and things like that imply that it's a given that you are always going to be able to have the means to attain whatever food that you need, and like all these different expensive things and blah, blah, blah. And they don't acknowledge people who are on the lower end of the food spectrum. And they don't acknowledge people who actively live in environments that are fighting against them when it comes to implementing the different principles. And the book does a fantastic job of acknowledging and validating that, which I think makes it so much more inclusive and accessible to so many different people. I think the book would definitely be beneficial for literally anyone and everyone to read at least once, to have these thoughts and concepts and ideas in their head, and having that, you know, gentle nudge towards respecting yourself and your body and wanting a healthy relationship with food, but that the people who are going to get the most benefit out of it are definitely people who are actively caught in the cycle of chronic dieting, or people who do experience binge eating disorder and who want to actively fight a lot of the thoughts and feelings behind that disorder. It definitely like wasn't the most tailored to me as somebody who experiences atypical anorexia. My problem is that I don't eat enough, and that I have an active feelings against eating a lot of the time. And so this book wasn't necessarily the most tailored for that, but it didn't make it any less educational or important to read. I truly think that anybody can benefit from reading this. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I had a blast hanging out with y'all. Peace.